Welcome to Show Studio's live panel discussions, where experts from across the industry come together and talk about the most important Fashion Week shows of the season. Today, we'll be talking about Louis Vuitton Autumn/Winter 24 menswear collection, looking at Pharrell's second collection for the brand and the wider fashion landscape. I'm Benji Park, better known as Fashion Boy, and I'm joined by some of our experts. So we'll start, Zach, with you.
Hi, I'm Zach. I'm Style Director at Gentleman's Journal, formerly of GQ.
I'm Danny Lomas, formerly of PAQ, currently of Danceplaining podcast.
I'm Jeanie and Annan-Lewin, and I'm Creative Director of Perfect magazine.
I'm Barry Pearce. I'm the fashion writer for Hero and Heroine.
Yeah, good. And it's fun because we do all actually like each other. What a weird little coagulation of fashion.
You think that?
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. Let's start just with initial thoughts on the show. I know we've spoken about it so much, but does anyone have something to say where they're just like, I gotta say it, this show was...
Watching it from home
Yeah.
on the live stream, I thought it was really interesting that Pharrell, presented it from the video started from backstage, which you never really see. You never really see the inner workings of what's going on at a show. And I think that kind of speaks to his display of, I want this to be about everybody behind the scenes. I want to show the world who's actually involved with it, like with his first collection, where he brought everyone out onto the catwalk. So I think that was quite admirable. And then, obviously, the collection itself was quite impressive.
I guess lots of Pharrell's stuff is about this pastiche of community, and we've been speaking about how it is a combination of various things and perhaps lacks continuity, but one thing that he has seemed to have kept up from his first collection is the idea of trying to include front of house and back of house, whether or not that works. We'll get onto it in some of the questions, and some of you guys, I'm sure, will talk about. Any other sort of points from a stylish perspective, for example, Jeanie, would you use this for a shoot? Do you think it actually has commercial viability?
I mean, some of it does. I mean, in terms of commerciality, it's kind of weird because I do feel like it's catering a lot to the 1%.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how your average person feels about this and how it's going to translate into, I don't know, high street brands kind of ripping off bits of it. There's some ideas that I liked, and then some ideas I felt like were a little bit lazy. I feel like, I don't know, controversial in terms of cowboys and westerns and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit low-hanging fruit. It's a bit like, that's a really obvious kind of theme to go with. And I think if you are going to go with an obvious theme, you need to kind of put your whole self in it, and the references need to be really, really strong. And it just needs to feel a bit special, and some of this did, but then some of it felt like, I don't know, I felt like it could have been edited down a bit more. There are some looks that I just wasn't kind of into, particularly the looks that he had, some of the female models where I felt they felt a bit lazy, if I'm truthfully honest. Having someone like this look, I was just a bit like, I'm not loving it. I'm not loving it, and I'm not sure how that translates to anybody else, but
kind of garden set.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And having a beautiful model like Aman, I can't remember what look that was. I think it was the skort trouser ensemble that we see everywhere. That one, there we go, 17.
Yeah.
I was kind of, when it came down and I was watching it on the live stream, I was like, I don't know. It's not if it's the best use. But perhaps it's not really for me, and it's, for somebody else, but I wasn't loving that either.
I think when we talk about earlier we were talking about how it felt quite unserious and quite fun, but in reality actually lots of the things that this collection is portraying are deeply important practices of craft and symbolism to the indigenous communities, specifically Lakota and Dakota, also the Sioux tribes and things like that. Louis Vuitton, when they opened their first atelier in Paris, was actually the same year that we had the Sioux massacre in America. So it feels quite poignant that Pharrell's referencing this reimagined version of the American West, perhaps a more egalitarian version. In retrospect, we now know that 1 in 4 cowboys was black, for example, things like that. Do you think connections, when they reference quite serious things, or perhaps serious motifs, or things that are important to individual communities, that they need to have more reverence for their points, or that fashion can still be fun?
I think you can do both, really, but I do think you need to include those communities fully. So, like, when I saw this, I assumed that the Compton Cowboys were going to be involved, and then realising that they weren't was really strange to me, because I was a bit like, these pictures are so important, they're sort of on, I just know they're on everyone's mood board, so why would you not go full force and have those people included? I don't know if there was some sort of logistical reason why it couldn't happen, but it feels a bit strange to me.
I agree. I think also, like, we obviously all receive a press release. We know what it's about. We write about it. We see it. We read about it. The average Joe who's aspiring to buy a Louis Vuitton bag, for instance, like in, Leeds or wherever, doesn't necessarily know now that Louis Vuitton is respecting those communities or referencing them in their main work.
Yes, I think that's a really good point.
I think they need to make sure that, because obviously people are watching the show, like the live stream was watched by thousands, but they didn't really reference it enough to show that to the people watching. We know because we saw it.
I guess, like, at what point does it stop becoming reference and it start becoming costume? I mean, I was speaking to someone about this recently. Jean-Paul Gaultier did a collection, I think in 2007, entirely inspired by the Hasidic Jewish community, which obviously I grew up in. And it was so pastiche-y. It was so what someone thinks a Hasidic Jew looks like. I found that quite offensive, even if the clothes were actually kind of a serve. So at what point, I mean, sorry, I can say that.
No, it's kind of wild.
But, like, look, I mean, like, that is actually quite mental. As a collection.
It's quite crazy.
Sorry, mum. Like, no, at what point do we stray into costume and actually it feels completely taken out of context because it's in like a multi-million-dollar production? And how does a designer transgress that line between having an accurate portrayal and having a portrayal that feels really diminutive?
Well, just don't do cowboy.
Specifically, Cowboys are off.
Well, it's just a bit like, wasn't this 3 seasons ago? And then also when you think about Virgil's past work, you could see, the way that he weaved in the cowboy aesthetic into his previous collections. I should know the dates, but I don't. It was the stuff that he did with Ib and those amazing movies. There was sort of elements of that. It was just, there were so many ideas going on in that collection, but it felt so cohesive and so like, okay, like we get it, we understand what's going on here. We can all sort of like jive with it. And I kind of wanted the same vibe. I wanted to kind of, I wanted to see lots of different ideas, but it all sort of seamlessly run together.
I think the question is, does Pharrell have a voice?
I think it's weird, because with Pharrell's background over the last few decades, obviously there's music, but it's everything from Neptunes to NERD to doing like the Despicable Me soundtrack. Like, he's a family household name. He's had Billionaire Boys Club, he's had
Ice Cream.
What else he had?
He's also
Human
had
Made.
loads of,
Human Made. He's got
speaking
like
about like
Human
jewelry
Race.
collaborations.
jewelry with Chanel, sunglasses with Tiffany, skincare with
He's got his Human Race.
Human Race, Stuff like, I think Louis Vuitton they made collections without a creative director, so I don't know what Pharrell's input is into this collection. Because for everything that he's made in the past and what he stands for, he is fantastic. You can put eyes on it, and I think obviously with Louis Vuitton, they are a brand that needs to keep himself ticking over, basically. No one's looking to Louis Vuitton for innovation. They just want a really solid runway show. But the thing that I don't get is, like we were saying, 3 seasons ago was Wild West. Out of everything he could have done, Virgil let you into his world and into his mind. Why did you get the sign-off for the Wild West?
I'm intrigued to know what the conversations were at the beginning when he pitched the Wild West, seeing as like, D-Squared have been doing that in every season for so long. Beyonce's doing it on her tour and got the world talking about Cowboys in their own way. But how did no one say, this isn't a new idea?
So like, what's the spin on it? Like, what's the take? How are we going to make this different? Or just, what are we trying to say? And I think in a time, I know I say this all the time, I'm so boring, but a time when there's so much going on, I don't think that people could just be making clothes to make clothes. It feels weird.
Yeah, I mean, also we spend our whole lives, especially working in fashion, being told how much damage fashion is doing to the planet, and it feels like when someone puts something out purely for... We understand fashion is a business, and at the end of the day, like, as much as we might love art and culture and things like that, these are clothes that have to sell. They can't stand alone. Fashion is that form of art that needs to have that commercial element. So we know that, but I feel like when we see collections where it just feels like there's very little purpose to them beyond performing on a calendar to keep up with like the appearances of being a major house, it does feel not only inherently wasteful from an intellectual perspective, but inherently wasteful just from a like sustainability and environmental sort of perspective. Obviously, like you say, Louis Vuitton, we're not looking for innovation, we are looking for something that just keeps taking over. I think with the clients and the amount of money they spend, it's a bit like Chanel. If you spent 40 million quid with this brand over the past 30 years, which they have quite a lot of clients who have, especially with fine jewelry, especially with watches now, and a designer comes in and gives you something completely different, you're going to be a bit miffed and you'll probably just move on. Do we feel like Pharrell will form a voice though? We're speaking about he does such a multitude of things. Do you think it's possible for him to actually tone a voice?
I mean, does he have really like a recurring theme running through things? It feels like he can do everything.
Yeah.
And I guess with women's fashion, it's about, I guess innovation again.
Yeah.
With men's fashion, it is quite a lot like smell like this bloke, look like this bloke, do this like this bloke. And I think Pharrell is kind of a great person who's, someone said it where they said he's not always in the news, but he's always in the public eye. So he's a good person to have fronting the brand. So like we're saying, just keep it taking over. And I don't know if he's really pushing for a voice. I think Virgil was really fighting for something where he was known in the fashion scene, or especially the streetwear scene, but he wasn't a household name. Whereas I think Pharrell's kind of like, right, stick it in cruise control, we'll stick him at the helm, and that's it. Otherwise, they had Wales Bonner, they had Martine Rose, they could have had a voice, but I think the Pharrell have kind of lent into it where it's like, you know what, carry it home for a bit and then just see where we go from there.
Yeah.
I think that kind of is indicative of the fact that we reached an intellectual, Jeanie, we were speaking about this earlier, but it feels like post-BLM, brands rushed to do something and have kind of swept the rug out of the feet of black designers, people like Pia Moss, who was just like basically totally abandoned by fashion, and then now has had various economic issues, people like Virgil, who obviously passed away, but then it felt like intrinsic to his designs, LVMH were interested in capitalizing on his blackness simultaneously. People like Grace Wells Bonner, Martine Rose, Arlo Alia, these designers who we know have the design integrity and as our peers we know are incredibly talented and we feel like they should be taking the next step in their careers and their male counterparts are taking the next step in their careers. You look at new appointments at McQueen, you look at new appointments that have happened recently, some that have been more controversial. Do we feel like this is kind of just a bit of an elongated cash grab for LVMH?
I think so. I think they're kind of just like, why rock the boat and it's working, so we should just keep doing that.
Yeah.
But it feels, I don't know, I struggle to understand what the point is because it's a bit like I thought we wanted to do a bit more, but maybe that's not, what Danny is saying is absolutely true and it's like, that's not the point. Maybe it's just a point of like, we want to keep selling the idea of luxury, and how do we do that? We do that.
Yeah.
All of these clothes are going to be on all the NFL players. It'll be on all, it's going to be on all the sportsmen when they're doing their little shimmy to the walk. Those little wonders, and you're like, why are they in that weird, ridiculous outfit? But they'll be in that, and then people will buy all the bags and it'll be fine.
Talking about the bags,
which I loved, by the way. I loved all the
started
bags.
as a luggage brand,
Yeah.
so we know that. We know that leatherwork is at the heart of their integrity as a brand, or canvas. Do we feel like the bags made up for the collection in terms of do we think they'll make up for the collection? Obviously, in terms of numbers, people will buy them. Do you think they'll be commercially viable at $11,000 for a slouchy bag?
If anyone wants to get me one, like, can you start a GoFundMe for a bag?
I think the bags are strong.
They're really good.
I think the introduction of new bags when,
Camouflage?
like, quite incredible.
Such a great name.
There was this kind of spacey themed one that was
Yeah.
a bit
Yeah.
futuristic, but for a brand that is, everyone knows their bags, everyone wants a Louis Vuitton bag.
Yeah.
Why, do they need to introduce new bags? No, but he did so and he did it well.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
if
that
it's,
does give some hope that he's actually innovating somewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
He's not just kind of like, sitting there as a placeholder.
No.
Which a lot of all of his collections so far have just felt like keep the brand going.
Yeah.
There's no real innovation there. Where it is quite nice, it's quite cute that he is doing this with the bags, and he is kind of having a lot of fun with the trunks as well, which I appreciate. He had the huge, like the red and black like take on the damier print. That was quite, I like that. It's giving, kind of Desperate Dan, and why not? But with everything else apart from the accessories, it's just kind of like.
I'm really intrigued to see, I know you mentioned sort of not fast fashion, but the fashion impact. I'm intrigued to see what brands like Zara, etc. What they copy. What are they going to take from this?
Yeah.
Are we going to get a Zara cowboy hat?
Are we just going to get, are we just going to get bootleg
just
jeans?
like a costume?
Because, I mean, we'll find out in about 3 days. But what?
But the word costume keeps coming up when we're talking about this collection.
Yeah.
And it is more glaring than ever in this collection. It's like, it's surely too costumey to ever have been viable, in a shop or even editorially. If you're using these clothes for an editorial, I already know what the editorial is looking like.
Next season I'm gonna. It's like I guess I'm doing a cowboy.
Yeah, exactly. You can't do anything else with it.
Where's this suit gonna go?
Like I wonder, but it just feels. It does feel too costumey.
I think he was also trying to. I think he said it was Cowboys mixed with Hollywood as well.
Yeah.
So it is very on the nose. I guess he
it
couldn't
just
really leave
feels
anything.
very 1%. It's like unless you're a rapper or an actor or like you're doing something very bougie, this is great for you. But if you want,
what this is about, like the theme of denim, for example, like denim is a working class material traditionally. We get the word blue collar. The etymology of it is it was first used in Iowa in 1924, for example, because it's about manual labor. The Wild West was about manual labor. It was about that crossover from manual labor and then into the Industrial Revolution, which we see with like the Carhartt pieces. So there's some narrative there, but when this is appropriated to portray literally the 1% with the prices, do we actually feel like it's playing on a theme that is a working class theme? And in the UK, there's been all of that dialogue around like pub culture being appropriated, or like Norman's Cafe, where you pay like, I don't go to Norman's Cafe, it's not kosher, but I've seen things about it. Is this kind of like the American version of an appropriation of a working class aesthetic, or do we think that Wild West has become more nuanced and it's become more in the public domain of creativity?
There's 2 points there where you could talk about the denim as a working class material, but then you could just actually go back to the actual Wild West and the Cowboys themselves. If you want to like historicize it, like these were people who were like, their job was to go out and rob people to get money. That was what they were doing. They were not the 1%, like famously. They were literally living in the pieces of America that had not yet been colonized. So it's like, it's almost like a double appropriation. There's like layers to the appropriation in this collection, which is as if you can intellectualize it so much. And I do find the idea of like the cowboy interesting, because so much of that, like we were talking about costume, so much of what we think of the cowboy aesthetic was just invented by Hollywood in the 40s and the 50s. John Wayne, Alan Ladd and Shane, stuff like that. And if you go back to the original Cowboys, they were not wearing this. They were in like 3-piece suits and bowler hats, So it's kind of like it just feels like a collection built on fallacy entirely. It's like fake on fake.
And I think as well, because of the fact that it's been done so recently as well, it's not as if he's thinking, right, what, this hasn't been done for decades, let's bring it back because it's going to leak into the mainstream anyway. It has, and it's been done, so it just feels even more like...
Yeah, it's like it's so close to like living recent memory that we had what was it called, like the Yeehaw aesthetic or whatever they called it. That was literally like just before the pandemic. And it's so recent. It's like what this isn't innovative. This is just doing what we've literally just seen.
Did it so you could release the Miley Cyrus song?
I mean,
That's the thing. Was the pageantry surrounding? I mean, one of the great things about Lagerfeld, for example, may he rest in peace, was that when the designs didn't necessarily come through, the set was so incredible that you felt like you were embodying the fantasy of Lagerfeld's mind, regardless. So even if you thought, I don't really like tweed that much, and I'm not super into fugly boots, but I'm watching a spaceship and this
Rihanna
is incredible,
in a shopping
and like the Queen of Jordan sitting there like nodding and da 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 da. Do we feel like Louis Vuitton is trying to tap into that, where the set supersedes the show, for example? And if we had just been looking at those clothes in isolation in a lookbook, would there be any points of positivity?
Did you think the set was that impressive?
I was thinking that, yeah.
Do you know what, actually? I think considering they obviously tried to pare it back a bit, I think that the set, look, I mean, interactive, super thingy screens, I think that's snow.
Yeah.
yeah, but like,
I mean, come on, give me satisfaction. Give me something to work with here.
Yeah.
Snow?
yeah, but Xenia did it just a couple of days ago. Like, it's not new.
That was like little pieces of
Cashmere,
wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's like this is like, okay, go design a show, and you've designed a show. This, I feel like, if you just watch lots of what Paris Fashion Week is now, if you aren't expecting, like, this is what you expect.
So were you
know?
disappointed? Was one disappointed with the sad?
I think it's pared back.
Yeah, I thought.
I think it's not quite 100, it's not quite 0.
Yeah.
I just think it kind of sits there, doesn't it? It's quite like, it's an impressive set with a lot of money behind it, but it doesn't feel like you're in a world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does feel a bit
I'd be intrigued to
stadium.
know if those backgrounds are sort of real landscapes from the places that he's referenced.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting.
That's
to
a
know.
really good question, actually.
There must be layers to it.
Yeah. No, I think there are. I just think it's like, and those pieces individually broken up. You know, if someone dropped at my door, I'd be like, oh, that's quite fab. Like, I'd wear that like funny jacket or like the denim, and you know, I thought the first.
I think that first coat
was beautiful.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
But there's a whole section in the middle that we didn't need to see.
Yeah.
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 I mean, the
Entirely.
tracksuits.
Yeah.
When we
Yes.
just got into the twin
tracksuits, please.
tracksuits, it was a bit like Twilight Zone.
Oh, God.
What's going on?
I think he knows that everyone's going to speak about that, and he still wanted to do. It's like you're saying, like the tunnel
They'll
tunnel
have
walk.
Travis Kelce
Or the
Kelsey
Timberlands.
walking in
Yeah.
that.
Louis Vuitton Timberlands, where they're just
Exactly.
a Timberland, and then you turn down the tongue, and then it's the monogram.
But everyone knows that that's going to be the photographed piece.
Yeah.
It's like you could see it and be like, oh no, it's probably from the collection, but that's going to be the one that everyone remembers.
Yeah, it's going to be what everyone calls in.
And probably some of the few pieces from this collection that will genuinely go into mass production across
Yeah.
the stores.
As collaborations go, I feel like the Timberland one has had a really underwhelming response.
Yeah.
I don't think there's
really
been.
like it.
It's good.
It's really good.
But
I like it.
I've barely seen anything about it. People
Yeah.
aren't
Did they
rushing
release
to
it,
go
though?
crazy. Well, no, but people aren't going crazy about it. Like, you know,
Yeah.
when there's a
Waiting for
Balenciaga
it.
Adidas thing sent down the catwalk.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen very little comparative coverage of this Louis Vuitton show in general.
That is true.
Beyond like beyond like the magazines who obviously always cover all the shows. I feel like in general response across social media has been pretty minimal.
Yeah.
I've seen like stories and stuff like that, but I haven't seen the same reaction that we had to Prada, for example,
Yeah.
or New Gucci, or you know,
Yeah.
I feel like it's actually been quite a demure reaction to this collection,
Yeah.
which is weird because part of Pharrell's allure, surely for LVMH, is his ability to go viral,
Yeah.
or to have those moments.
Why do we think that is, though? Is it the kind of like pared back staging? Is it the collection itself? Is it like why did it not hit?
Well, I wonder it's because the other collection before was so recent that sort of
Yeah.
so it feels, like.
So it feels over, and another one.
But that's a whole different conversation of how we have too many things happening.
Well, I know, yeah. What do you think Pharrell can do to narrow his perspective in a positive way, to stop being too many things at once and to focus on creating a collection that has a narrative thread, that has cohesiveness? Or do we think brands, I do love that bag.
Yeah, the bag's
I
amazing.
actually like this look.
I really like that bag.
Yeah, it looks great.
I really like
jacket's
that
amazing.
bag. I know it's like the Tinder swindler Birkin, but like, I really enjoy it. I think it's quite cool.
Yeah.
I think taken apart, the collection I know we say costume, and a lot of it is, but if you do take like this jacket, it's like a standard varsity jacket, that is wearable.
Yeah.
It's a really nice riff on a Carhartt jacket that is wearable.
Yeah.
The bootleg jeans are wearable, but I think when it's all put together and you're like, that's intimidating to anyone.
Yeah. I mean, even I think it's Look 9 has a nice jacket.
I'm very, very intrigued to see the first first red carpet look from this, or the first premiere look, and who's wearing it and what one they choose, because I wouldn't know what to wear.
Yeah, I'd be a bit overwhelmed.
Same.
Without, you know, doing the little Nas X cowboy thing that was done in 2019.
And also, all of these clothes, you kind of have to wear full look.
Yeah.
There's very few.
Do you have to wear the hats?
There's very few pieces where I feel like you can isolate them beyond the Carhartt pieces, which is everyday wear, and some of the bomber jackets. Like, I just
Even that one, to be fair. What's that? If we got the slightly camo-y looking one. That one there, number 16.
Oh, 16.
16. It's quite.
With Matthew. No, with what's his name? Matthew Simeo.
Yeah. Even
Nice
that's
boy.
kind of like quite
It's like
Northern
a cowboy
England.
print, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's a print.
I mean, it looks like
It's a
Vogue.
cowboy and Vuitton and all that.
Oh,
If you zoom up on it,
to be honest, actually, it looks like the willow pattern from afar.
Yeah.
But it's been like inverted. But it's a nature landscape. Yeah, I think it's
Red Dead Redemption.
But is it interesting enough to? And also, will it translate to a red carpet? Do we think it will have its press moments? I mean, Jeanie, like you were saying, if you're going to shoot this for a magazine,
Yeah,
are you
I'm
going
gonna
to
be-
have to just go Wild West?
What other designers from this season would you even put with it?
This
if you
is
were
what I
doing
mean.
a cowboy shoot.
You just have to do a collection story and hope for the best, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But there's some elements. It's not that I don't like it. I kind of feel like it all clubbed together feels very overwhelming. And what is the message that we're trying to send out?
I think what it comes down to, again, like we were speaking about earlier, Pharrell's not a designer.
Yeah.
we can
Is
tell.
that an issue? When the term creative director, I feel like, is one that over the last 10 years have really metamorphosized into meaning something else. Because when you say creative director, just like by the definition of the word, one doesn't necessarily think designer, because you are the director of the creative, just like if you're a director of photography or whatever. Like, you're more overseeing the creative process, collating a mood board, providing references, etc. But now we've grown to see creative directors as these like one-stop shops of reference and creativity, and then also technical skill, sewing or making or whatever. And there are some incredible designers, like Charles Jeffrey is a really good example of someone who can actually do it all and is incredibly talented at doing it all. But for someone like Pharrell, does he need to have design experience? Do we feel like this collection shows that he doesn't have design experience? Because when you make something yourself, you understand the cohesiveness more? Or do we think we're in the era where we can just have like, isn't like Quavo or something, creative director of Lanvin?
Oh, no, it's not. It's Future.
He's the interim
Did a capsule.
I haven't actually seen...
I've seen it. No words. Let's just.
But like, are we entering the age, one of the celebrity creative director, like, is Emma Watson going to head up Prada when Mucha?
But this is
She'd never go.
This is the
May she
problem, is
never
that
go.
it's the love of celebrity beyond kind of sense, where we're sort of just entrusting people to kind of have good taste and logic, and kind of going, you can look after this household brand that's been going on for 75 years or whatever.
So like, also for Louis Vuitton, aren't we reaching like 150 years or 200 years anniversary or something crazy?
Such an old brand,
1854 or 1874 or something. It's a lot of weight to take on in terms of like, you think you're steering the ship of like basically what will be probably one of the biggest fashion houses in history in terms of like when you think about human consumption and portrayals of art.
I mean, last year it was the first to reach 20 billion annually, but it's like, will that carry on with this? Will the clothes be able to add to that?
Yeah. Do you think though that we can have head designers and creative directors who aren't designers, and there be a symbiosis between those two?
I think
or do we
so.
need creative directors who know how to make bloody clothes?
I think it would help because then you get a bit of greater understanding. But I also just think a collective works. I don't think one person has to do it all.
Yeah.
But I do think that there needs to be a level of kind of understanding and a cohesiveness. Because, you know, we can all sit here and pick out certain ideas, but that's because we're trained to do so. I always just think, well, what does the average person think? And what part, you know, they want to see themselves in some of these brands and, you know, feel aspirational. And I don't know if you can, essentially, in that. But if that's not what you're trying to push, and that's absolutely fine. But if we're not given any guidelines into that, then...
I think the average person sort of scoffs at fashion in a sense of it being costumey. So then when they see something from the biggest brand in the world and the most talked about brand, do they just think, move on, that's that fashion, whatever's going on there. And I don't know if maybe that's what's happened here, and that's why social media is like, well, we're not going to bother talking about that because that is wildly out of anything we're used to.
I mean, you know, I hate to say it, but we are entering that. It's so like TikTok of me to say, I'm ashamed. So guys are like real journalists. We're entering that age of quiet luxury. Is this like where everyone's obsessed with quiet luxury? It's like recession core. Obviously, we know that we're heading into a harder economic time than we've probably experienced since 2007. I feel like in the UK, we perhaps feel it differently also because we've left the EU and there are different sort of difficulties surrounding that. Do you feel like clothes like this, we're looking at brands like Prada who are very pared back, we're looking at Sabato De Sarno's who's just showed his latest collection for Gucci, and he was very clear that he wanted to make clothes, not costumes. Like he critiqued Alessandro Michele for having done in the past. Do we feel like this is completely like flying in the face of that, and that's why it's not resonating?
I mean, I don't know. I personally, I want to dream, so I want to see things that are quite wild and, you know, and feel hopeful and joyous. So I like the collection for that, but there needs to be a bit of practicality as well. I think there needs to be both, you know? I don't really want to see one or the other. I don't want to feel so far removed where I'm just like, you're just in a bubble and you don't know the price of milk and that's why you're creating clothes like this. But I also don't want to see someone forcing me to go back into the office.
You know? But that's the big thing, which is this is ready to wear. Like it is there because it's meant to be consumed, not necessarily by a mass market, but within fashion by a mass market or by a mass market of consumers who are geared towards luxury. Like couture, you can give me Schiaparelli eating a lobster in diamonds any day of the week, and we're like, you want to dream, you want to go to couture and feel completely enamored. But for ready to wear, do you think this actually just is kind of the antithesis of the very definition of what it's meant to be, which is
just the why the Wild West? I think that's what it keeps coming back to. It's with Pharrell, you could kind of go with anything. He's known for being a dreamer, and even if it's wrong right now, it'd be right in a year's time or 2 years' time. And I just think I don't want another Wild West revival. I just think it's a bit pointless.
Either one, is there another theme that you would like to see him play on, or...
I think for the start, like for his first few collections, show us your mind. Go a bit wild, don't really have a theme, just kind of think, right, he's been aware of Louis Vuitton for years and years, obviously. He must have had something in his mind that thought, do you know what, if I became head of Louis Vuitton, this is the kind of stuff that I'd do. Why can't you just reference that and be like, do you know what, this is how I'd do it, what do you all think? And then from there, you kind of build up where you want to take it.
But what if this is his mind? What if this is...
God help us all.
I think that's almost more damning. What if Pharrell's sitting at home thinking,
I don't think it is, because it feels like a lot of watered down ideas that Virgil had, and then some bits of, you know, street culture, which I love, but it just doesn't, I think because it's not in a direction that makes enough sense, you're just a bit like, I don't really know what parts I'm supposed to be paying attention to. There's a lot of stuff.
Are there other points we would rather see? Sorry, Zach.
So it's quite interesting to see that he's the only designer, I think, so far in Paris who's had a strict theme. And I think across so far, you don't really see like a Gucci. There was no...
I liked this coat, I liked this coat, but it was very Matthew William. It was very Givenchy. It was so reminiscent, and I feel like the parts that we have discussed that we liked in the collection,
we've
seen.
What was it, Ref for Calvin Klein?
Oh, that was brilliant. 205. What was that?
What a time.
Anyway, Zach, sorry.
I think just when you look at, you know, Sabato and all the other designers and Mattia Bottega, they don't have these themes that sort of like it's like a Disney film. It's got a strict theme, but they don't have that. So I don't know if that's sort of a bad thing for Pharrell to have such a I'm going to stick to this season and do that in its complete pastiche way, whereas everyone else doesn't.
It comes down to how much does one want their consumer to dream?
Yeah.
How much does one want their consumer to be enamored by their perspective? With Louis Vuitton, it's obvious that you need to fit your life into this collection.
Yeah.
You're a consumer, you need to embody this. This doesn't embody you. With Sabato at Gucci, Valentino's also really good at doing this, Pierpaolo. It fits you. Prada fits you. You can go and do what you want in it. It provides a uniform. It provides some continuity. It's also nice, like I was saying earlier, you know that when you make your purchases, it's probably not going to zigzag in a completely opposite direction in 2 seasons, and you're going to have spent $1,000 on something that's now a bit naff.
Yeah.
Are we in the age where designers get to set to their audience what they wear, or do we feel like because of social media now, like it was in the 90s, where like if a designer put something down on a runway, you wore it because it was cool, and that they controlled the entire kind of stratosphere of communication? But with the age of social media, do we feel like consumers are being more savvy?
I think that, sorry to jump in, I just kind of think that in terms of aesthetics, people launch one every fucking week, and they make, and there's like nobody actually said that, i.e. mob wife. No one says that, because people who are doing crime are not on TikTok. They're doing crime. What are you talking about? But we have everything is so fast moving that it feels hard to kind of put things in a theme and package it out.
I agree.
Because the life cycle is what, 6 days? And
I guess we don't really have that thing anymore where, because although we've either grown up around fashion, we've been in fashion for a few years. Imagine seeing your first ever runway show and that being it. Would you be like, I'm going to save up so much money to then spend it on this because it means the most to me? It's the first one I ever watched.
Yeah.
And I don't think you would really.
No, absolutely not, no.
That's it's so interesting thinking about being in the perspective of, obviously we're a bit hardened to it now because we spend, there are so many fashion weeks. We spend so much time.
These under-eye bags are real.
No, literally. Like, you can barely cough before another fashion week happens.
Yeah.
That maybe we're slightly desensitized to it. And when you think about going to your first show, I mean, I remember like my first show was McQueen, and I was literally like, what the hell, like this is incredible. I wonder, does one feel inspired by this, or does one just sit in that show and think, what the hell is going on?
I think maximalism has its place, and this is a really fun thing, but the shows that I always remember are the ones where the clothes are things I want to wear. So I remember like Aurelie the other day, yesterday was absolutely incredible. And it's clothes that I would buy and wear. Prada was the same. And then I think of the other ones as, that was really fun, but do I want to wear it? And I think that's what the audiences are probably thinking.
I always dream about that jacket and how it's part of my life.
And I think someone who plays on a theme but still executes quite wearable clothing is SS Daily. You think about, when I was speaking to Stephen about this, like he does touch on quite wild themes sometimes. We're talking about like late Victorian homoeroticism, or like the idea of like putting in these rogue military inspirations, or like he's inspired by like a random stately home like Knoll or something, or letters from Vita Sackville West to Virginia Woolf, all of these things that Stephen still provides, and you do get the fantasy when you look at his clothing. And when you look at it like this, it sometimes can look quite like starkly his vision, but people wear them really well. And the clothes feel like you can take individual pieces and purchase them, which is important because, like we say, as much as we love fashion as an art, it is a business. Do you feel like this is just a much better translation of a theme as opposed to just like the really harsh pastiche elements like a cowboy hat?
It feels like a runway show. It feels like you're wearing a runway look.
I say, I don't want to have to read the show notes. I just want to have to...
That's a good point. I just want to get it.
True. I just want to watch a show and like, okay, I know exactly what you're doing. I don't want to have to rely on the
and be like, what's happening?
That's what I mean, right? When I was saying earlier, the audience who doesn't get those show notes in their email 10 minutes later doesn't know these references, doesn't get Pharrell's vision and why he's done this. Whereas they're just seeing it like, okay, Pharrell likes Cowboys, cool.
I think that's really
Cowboys are in.
There was such little coverage. Obviously, my domain is TikTok, and there was such little coverage on TikTok about it because, one, actually, the Vogue Runway review on the show was like pretty laborious and very technical, and I enjoyed it, but I'm an academic, so it's a bit of a different thing, whereas I was speaking to some other people who were just like, I actually couldn't understand it. But if you don't have the show notes, then how do you break down a collection like this? Because you just feel like you're saying that it's costume, and then you feel like your viewpoint's invalid, so you don't want to put that out. So it kind of is indicative of the lack of coverage when you put out something that's either confused or far too blatant, because people don't really know what to say and how to digest it. Can I ask the questions now? Cool.
I was intrigued very quick to see, there wasn't really any more reference, I don't think, for the Disney situation, because they had the illustrator, the like iconic illustrator from Disney tease the cowboy situation before on Instagram.
What was the point?
And I thought maybe there would be some kind of more of that, like having that on a shirt would be quite major, but like his illustration, that was the one that set Disney's cowboy relationship up in the first place.
Kind of like Raph at Calvin Klein 205, where he had like the toot toot, that bird that people used to watch as children. What was it called? Looney Tunes.
Yeah, Looney Tunes.
Okay, let's ask. We've spoken to our audience and got some questions. I think these are really interesting. So, one question: black guest list and creative director, but team is fully white. We tired. Thoughts?
God, I'm trying to think of a new way of saying the same thing.
Jenny, I'm sorry.
3 to 5 days.
We've already spoken about this, and now the emotional labour of saying it.
I feel like I just wander out and go, hi, diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
We should have some. I think it starts at schools. It starts in education. It starts all over the place, and you can't be in what you can't see. So if there's not enough sort of people of colour teaching people fashion and inspiring them to go into schools and colleges and do all of those kind of things, and they don't ever get to this point, do they? If we don't have enough mentoring sort of places, like wonderful places like Mentoring Matters and stuff like that, that are sort of giving people the tools and the knowledge to get into fashion in a realistic way. This is why we have rooms full of white people and very few black people who are then kind of unguided and, you know, have to make some very sort of strange choices by themselves because there's not really that much of a support group. I hope that in my lifetime I get to see things change, but I don't know if we can. Because we can barely get enough sort of women creative directors. So I don't know how we're going to get into a point of getting more POCs sort of in places. Unless we, you know, I don't know, unless you kind of shut down for 3 years and you make everybody mandatory hire people, there's not much else you can do. And I also don't know if that's what I don't think that that's what the market wants. That's why it's the way it is. Which has been a very sobering thought. For the last couple of months, I was like, oh, not everyone's got the same dream as me. Right. It'll just be me then, kicking around, saying the same thing every 3 to 5 days. So here I am. Let's hire some people that look like me, just saying. Anyway, that's enough of my speech.
I'm intrigued to see what happens, because the next big opening is Givenchy, and they have an opportunity now to put someone of colour in that role and a woman.
Surely they have to. Givenchy is only cool because that there have been black cultural innovators who have worn it. I'm sorry, but like Hubert de Givenchy is cold. That man's gone. We're not thinking about breakfast at Tiffany anymore.
No.
Like Givenchy's entire cultural relevance has been perpetuated by specifically a black American community. Surely they have to at this point. I mean,
absolutely right. It'll just be somebody else that you're like, oh, okay, sure.
Push it back for a little bit longer.
Just keep, I'll just have to keep hearing black soundtracks when I go see those shows. I feel really awkward about it. I'm like, is it?
You know, I feel like governing bodies like the Chambre Syndicale de l'Agriculture, like the CFDI, like the BFC, should be doing more. You're there because you're meant to be overseeing fashion, not just the operations of fashion, but also the ethical and moral status of how fashion operates within our country. We also put a lot of trust and actually a lot of time into you as organisations. We come to your events, we clap at your dinners, We're here so you will make a betterment of our industry. There needs to be more governing bodies who are taking actually a really formative role, especially considering that lots of them get government funding.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I think a big thing, you know, we speak about diversity. well, also the largest consumer demographics in the world aren't European anymore.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you want to be more in touch with your consumers? If you're referencing things, why wouldn't you want to have people who can understand those references?
Because we like the idea of Blacklist, but we just like it performed by other people who aren't black, which is a really sobering thought. But I mean, I just wish that we'd be able to dig into it more, or we just say, actually, fuck that, we're not here for that, and then nobody has to bring it up ever again. But it does feel like it's like, how do we solve this problem? And it's like, we're all telling you how to, but every year it's the same. I would love to see people of colour in some of these decision-making roles and really see, you know, how we could kind of change things and just see a different perspective. But I just don't know how you can do that in a market that is not just not really ready for that.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the next questions that someone asked, does LVMH, not funny, but morbidly we continue, does LVMH actually plan on hiring black people or POC, or just to capitalise off black culture?
Well,
Yeah.
I don't really know what to say. Yeah, sadly, I really want to be like positive about this, but I do. Yeah, I think so. I think it's just all a bit like everyone knows a Drake song, but no one wants anyone who looks like Drake working there.
Another question, I think we've answered this quite significantly, is there any cohesion in the vastly different influences of Pharrell's LV collection so far? Do we see a narrative thread?
Well, throughout all of them.
And the pixelated looks.
Well, no, 3 really. Yeah.
3 shows, yeah.
I think so, but I think it's kind of just it's a lot of luxury and wealth that you see, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, for someone who is designing for the people and, you know, making a brand that's so inclusive, I was surprised to see the price hat up.
Yeah.
Too extortionate amounts
Price
of money.
increases are just in.
Because how much is a speedy bag? Isn't it like 8 or 11 grand or something along those lines? Just
For the turquoise, yeah. But you know, it's like the Chanel classic flap. Like I feel like that's kind of like our moderator for price increases. Like it's increased something like 103%, and it just seems to continue. Now, you know, they start at like £11,000 now. You can get a Birkin for an extra grand. Like I don't want to look like a frumpy grandmother. I could get a Birkin. Oi. No, I think the big conversation, the conversation that we're going to continue having in fashion. And Jeanie, I feel like every time we see each other, we talk about this in some capacity, because obviously both of us walk into rooms and look different in different ways. Is there any way? Is it just decision makers that we think is the key? I mean, all of us will know. We know what it's like to work in fashion. We know what it's like to see the people at the top who no one else sees as well, and people who think decision makers, perhaps publicly, aren't the decision makers that we know are. Do you know what I mean? The faces of business, people like Anna Wintour, for example, who people think the buck stops with her, but there are numerous people and boards and things like that above her. Do you think the only way for us to see any sort of tangible change, where we see things like diversity, but not just necessarily diversity in a performative way, but you know, religious diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of evolution, diversity of ethnicity, diversity, you know, racial diversity, is that we need to be hiring people higher up who are? We do. We need to, it's great having people at the forefront. I think we do that with like models, and you look at the model landscape and you're like, oh yeah, it's really fair. And it's like, is it? Because there's only like 4 black models, and then they can't all do the same show because there's like too many black models. It's the same thing that we do with plus size. You know, there's just a lot of rules and not enough people kind of in those seats where they can really kind of make change, which is why people are building their own seats and their own tables and having discussions off. But I really want to be able to, I think people, whenever I talk about that, people think you're sort of like begging to be at a table. I just think the table is unfair. Yeah.
And I think the more people you see at the table, the more perspectives you'll see. And we're not telling the same story over and over again. There is something, I think, really, really, really uncomfortable about a landscape where there's loads of male designers designing things in the male gaze for females.
Yeah.
It's a bit strange. It's just like, oh, okay, so all the models look like they're 16, but you can't really afford the clothes until you're about in your 40s.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? What's going on? You know? Like, no one feels weird about this, no? Okay, it
all
feels...
designed for what a man, even if it is a gay man, one can't be a man and not be tinged by subversive misogyny,
the patriarchy is everywhere.
by the male lens, by a sexualized lens, even if that's not our boat that we float. It's just impossible to not be tinged by those societal things, and yet we expect these men to set the entirety of standard and design for women.
It's overwhelming for them. It's overwhelming as a visual person who wants to view that kind of stuff. I mean, I think if you're like a young person, this must be horrific, seeing the same sort of narrative over and over again. And I don't think it's just getting anybody, but all I'm saying is that there's skilled people there who want to tell stories. Let's try and see if we can give them a chance. And if not, let's give them some support so they know how to run a business in order to be in a position to sit at said table. But I think the only way we do that is if people really, really want to open the doors. And if they don't, then it's Groundhog Day.
And they quite easily can't, which is the thing. And I think something that has been, again, I feel like every time we talk about it, we discuss it, the idea that people look at you differently, or that shows in Paris turn me away, for example, because they seem to think that I shouldn't be there.
Or it's the opposite of people thinking that things are fixed. So people see me in my role and they congratulate me, and I'm sit there telling people that the glass ceiling has actually got concrete on top of it. So what are we going to do?
Because a designer like Pharrell, even if it is just a visual perspective showing to a next generation, is there a value in the fact
100%.
that a black man sits inherently at the head of perhaps the oldest and largest fashion
It's amazing to see that, and that we've gotten that far, but we need to be doing more and not just kind of like doing the bare minimum of hiring someone that I don't know if he fits into like billionaire status. It's like he is somebody that's insanely wealthy and has been dominating the music market for decades. So it's a great choice, but it can't be the only choice, and it doesn't mean that the whole thing is sort of fixed. We just all need to be kind of working together to create different conversations.
You just touched on something that I was thinking. You mentioned young people. And I see a lot on social media and discussions with friends in the industry. A lot of the decision makers at the top companies and these huge like conglomerates are older. And that's not, I don't want to be ageist or anything, but you can't have a 70-year-old making decisions when they've already had to shift their own mindset because they were brought up in a different way to suit what's happened post-2019, post-2020. And then ignore the people at the bottom who, at the lower end of the age bracket, who are just naturally inclined to think in a certain way. And I think that's where change isn't quite happening because we're answering and the strategies are being sort of manifested by older people who don't want to see change or can't see change or the value of change.
I suppose this is just indicative of the specifically Britain and the US, where not only is it in our creative spheres of business where it seems like a much, much older percentage of people have accumulated vast amounts of capital by, the residual impacts of the exploitation of the 20th centuries and the late 19th centuries that they inherited from their parents. And now they've obviously, the planet has been destroyed, and in general, we don't view exploitation as a viable way to make money anymore. Well, depends who you ask.
Some people are just fine with
exactly.
Some people are absolutely chill.
But actually, we'll wait to name names until after. But politicians as well. It's like when you look at the US and you just think like, someone needs to put this man to bed, for example. We get like 80-year-old politicians who are setting rules that
it's not giving
the legislation won't come in to impact them until probably after they've passed away. It's the same in fashion. We have I wasn't talking about Donald Trump. That's such a read. That's really funny. Do you know what, actually, on that note, let's call it a night. We've got our AI question. That's really funny.
So I wonder what was typed in.
If you could teleport one piece from the Louis Vuitton /W24 menswear collection straight into your wardrobe, which would it be and why?
No, you're teleporting.
That's a very important question.
I can't afford a single thing.
Pharrell's human-made T-shirt.
We really need to unionise in fashion, because that seems to be a common conversation that we can't afford
any of that.
I like the bags, the sort of, I don't know how.
The camouflage or like the trunk?
The black leather
the
with
modern.
the brown monogram, the modern take on like a whatever that is. I also would quite like the trunk on the car because that's quite fun to go shopping with.
I think it would make a really nice coffee table. I think it would make a really nice coffee table.
Yeah.
Danny?
Maybe the jacket from Look 9, I think I'd actually get my wear out of that one.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Get a bit wear out of that. There's also one, it's quite like the Woolwich Buffalo check, you know, the red and black thing. It's one further down, I can't remember the name of the look, and it's quite underrated. I was looking at it today on the show, I was like, you know what, that's quite cool. Maybe the tracksuit as well for fun a bit.
The red check is so Dior to me.
Yeah, keep going down actually, please. Bit further, keep going. Oh, maybe not.
You're like, oh,
Maybe it was awful. Maybe it was. Down slightly. I think that is number 63, is that? I think that, when it's walking down, I think when the light hit it in a different way, it looked deep. Like it looked rich, it didn't just look like a flat pattern.
No, that's definitely...
I think that looked quite cool. I think, again, you could get a bit wear out of that.
That's definitely a choice. You could pull that, but also you're tall, so it's different. Clothes sit so well on you. I could see that. I could see you wearing that. Jeanie, go on.
Well, since none of them are plus size, none of them would fit me. I've got to stop moaning, Jesus.
See, I used to be able to say that, but now I'm wasting away.
I love all the bags.
Doesn't pay.
I love all the bags. Are amazing. The pink sort of, I think the slightly oversized Speedy bag was fab. That's a bit of me. There was a really good bomber as well that looked quite cute. Where was it? It was
the
black.
peach. Are you talking about? Was it in the peach colour?
No, it was like, I think it was black and it had some like really nice. That one. There you go. 30. I think that's quite a nice. Yeah, that could be quite fab.
Yeah. With are those florals or lassos?
I think they're floral. Are they?
Yeah, florals. Maybe like kind of
florals,
prairie flowers and things like
I was
that.
like, that's quite sweet.
That's a kind of Simone Rochery to me.
Yeah, that's probably why I was like,
Yeah, it's probably very Louis.
Barry?
2 words, denim chaps.
Denim chaps.
Could see you
Is it
there.
the first time a major fashion house has made denim chaps? Perhaps.
No, D squared.
Yeah, D squared.
Are we calling D squared a major fashion?
Martin Rose did.
Sorry, do you know what, actually, that's a reach.
Martin Rose did a collab with Tommy Hilfiger last year, and in the campaign images were denim chaps for a collaboration made for the average consumer, which was quite
That's cool.
major.
I just want to say I do actually like D squared. I just wouldn't call it a major house. So I really love D squared. I thought the show was beautiful. I would take probably just the first coat. I feel like I'd get so much wear out of it. It's also blooming freezing in London.
Yeah.
Do you think that was thick though? What do
do
we?
you know, actually, I hate the tassel. I would cut the tassels off with a scalpel in my kitchen. I don't like tassels, and they're just getting muddy. And also, I'm not that tall, so coming up and down the steps at Shull, I'm just going to get it dirty. Okay, cool. Right, now, thank you to all the panellists and to all of those of you watching. For more extensive Fashion Week coverage, be sure to visit showstudio.com. And if you're watching via Show Studio's YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe below, and we will see you next time. Bye.